The Crusades, a catalyst for change in medieval Europe. The Crusades, a series of military campaigns initiated by Christian Europe between the 11th and 13th centuries, had profound and far-reaching effects on the medieval world. While their primary aim was the reclamation of Jerusalem and other holy sites from Muslim control, the impact of the Crusades extended far beyond the battlefield. In many ways, the Crusades served as a catalyst for change, driving political, social, economic, and religious transformation in medieval Europe. This article explores how the Crusades contributed to significant shifts in the structure and nature of European society, laying the groundwork for many of the changes that would later define the Renaissance and the early modern period. 1. The rise of papal power and church authority. One of the most significant outcomes of the Crusades was the increased power of the papal authority within Europe. The Pope, as the spiritual leader of the Catholic Church, had long been an important figure, but the Crusades elevated the papacy to a new level of political and military influence. The call for the First Crusade by Pope Urban II in 1095 marked the beginning of a period during which the Pope's authority extended not only over religious matters but also over political and military decisions across Christendom. 1.1. Papal leadership and the unification of Europe. The Pope's ability to call for a unified Christian effort across diverse European kingdoms demonstrated the Church's ability to shape the political landscape of Europe. The promise of indulgences or forgiveness of sins for those who participated in the Crusades galvanized large segments of the European population, from kings to peasants, to take up arms. This unity under the Church's banner, despite regional differences, signified a remarkable consolidation of authority under papal leadership. While the Crusades were a religious endeavor, they also served to reinforce the Pope's role as a mediator in European politics. The Pope's intervention in European conflicts, both spiritual and temporal, became more pronounced during the Crusades, enhancing the Church's political power. 2. The development of feudalism and the medieval military system. The Crusades also had a significant impact on the feudal system, the social and political structure that dominated medieval Europe. The demands of crusading warfare led to changes in the way feudal obligations were viewed and enacted. 2.1. The role of nobility in the Crusades. Feudalism was centered around a network of obligations between lords and vassals, with military service being one of the most important duties. The Crusades presented European nobles with a unique opportunity to gain wealth, land, and prestige. As a result, many knights and nobles took part in the Crusades, leaving their lands under the control of their vassals or heirs. This shift in landholding, combined with the long periods of warfare, created opportunities for the consolidation of power and the emergence of new feudal alliances. In some cases, the Crusades led to the weakening of the noble class. The high costs of participating in the Crusades drained the resources of many noble families, forcing them into debt or financial ruin. At the same time, the need for new leadership in Crusader states created opportunities for new families to rise to power, often displacing older, more established dynasties. 2.2. The evolution of military practices. The Crusades also contributed to the evolution of medieval military practices. The need for organized, large-scale military campaigns prompted changes in the structure and tactics of medieval armies. The use of siege warfare, the creation of military orders like the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller, and the emphasis on discipline and logistics all became more pronounced as a result of the Crusades. These military innovations would later influence the development of modern warfare. 3. Economic change and the expansion of trade. The Crusades were not just wars of religious fervor but also a driving force in the expansion of the medieval European economy. The demand for resources to support the Crusades, such as soldiers, ships, and weapons, stimulated trade and commerce across Europe and the Mediterranean. 3.1. Growth of trade routes. The Crusaders' need for supplies led to the establishment of new trade routes, particularly between Europe and the Middle East. As Crusader states were established in the Near East, they became centers of trade, facilitating the exchange of goods like spices, silks, and precious metals between Europe and the Islamic world. This exchange of goods not only enriched the Crusader states but also contributed to the growth of Italian city-states like Venice, Genoa, and Pisa, which became key players in Mediterranean trade. Additionally, the Crusades helped to revive long-dormant trade routes that had been closed off due to the decline of the Roman Empire and the rise of Islamic rule in the Mediterranean. The increased flow of goods and wealth from the east to the west spurred the growth of European markets, paving the way for commercial expansion that would help transform Europe during the Renaissance. 3.2. Banking and finance. The financial demands of the Crusades also led to the development of new banking and financial systems. The need to fund Crusader armies and the costs associated with maintaining military campaigns led to the growth of credit systems and the expansion of European banking. Italian banks, in particular, played a crucial role in financing the Crusades, and these institutions later helped to drive the development of modern finance. 4. Social and cultural change. The Crusades also had a profound impact on the social and cultural fabric of medieval Europe. The experiences of the Crusaders in the East and the cultural exchanges that occurred during the Crusades contributed to a broadening of European horizons. 4.1. The interaction between East and West. The Crusaders' contact with Islamic and Byzantine cultures had a lasting effect on European society. Crusaders encountered advanced knowledge in fields like medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy, and the transfer of these ideas back to Europe had a transformative impact on medieval scholarship. This exchange laid the groundwork for the Renaissance, which would later flourish in Italy and other parts of Europe. Additionally, Crusaders were exposed to the rich artistic and architectural traditions of the East, including the design of mosques, palaces, and fortresses, which influenced European architecture. The adoption of Eastern ideas and artistic styles helped to stimulate new trends in European art and architecture, marking the beginning of a slow cultural transformation in the West. 4.2. The social mobility of Crusaders. For many European peasants, the Crusades offered an opportunity for social mobility. By taking part in the Crusades, they could earn wealth, land, or status that might otherwise have been inaccessible to them. Additionally, the religious motivation behind the Crusades gave peasants a sense of purpose and spiritual reward, as they were promised indulgences or forgiveness for their sins. This sense of religious duty helped to overcome the obstacles that might otherwise have kept them from leaving their lands. 5. Religious and ideological change. The Crusades also played a key role in shaping the religious and ideological landscape of medieval Europe. The concept of a holy war against Islam and the promise of eternal salvation for those who participated led to the development of a religiously charged atmosphere in which Christianity became even more deeply entwined with political and military endeavors. 5.1. The Crusades and the rise of religious orders. The Crusades also gave rise to new religious orders, such as the Knights Templar, the Knights Hospitaller, and the Teutonic Knights, which not only served as military forces but also as religious and charitable organizations. These orders had a profound influence on the religious and social structure of medieval Europe, and their legacy can still be felt today in various forms, including the continued influence of Catholic religious orders and their role in charitable activities. 5.2. The shift in Christian ideals. While the Crusades were framed as religiously motivated, they also revealed the complex relationship between religion, politics, and power. As the Crusades progressed, Christianity in Europe began to take on more militaristic and territorial dimensions, with an emphasis on spiritual warfare. This shift in Christian ideology, which emphasized the justification of war for religious ends, laid the foundation for future conflicts that would be fought in the name of faith. Conclusion. The Crusades were a catalyst for profound change in medieval Europe. They reshaped the political, social, economic, and religious landscape, influencing the development of Western civilization in the centuries that followed. The Crusades helped to elevate the power of the Church and the Pope, altered the dynamics of the feudal system, stimulated economic growth through expanded trade, fostered social and cultural exchanges between the East and West, and played a crucial role in the development of modern banking. More than just a series of military campaigns, the Crusades were a transformative force that contributed to the emergence of a more interconnected and dynamic Europe. Banda NOI. T5 IEP. ChatGPT to NOI. The Crusades, a catalyst for change in medieval Europe, continued. The lasting consequences of the Crusades extend well beyond their immediate historical and political outcomes. The period of the Crusades, while centered around warfare and religious zeal, acted as a powerful engine for the transformation of medieval society. It redefined the course of European history, laying the foundation for many of the developments that would unfold in the Renaissance and the early modern period. The changes initiated by the Crusades contributed not only to political restructuring and economic growth, but also led to religious shifts that would have a profound influence on the shape of the Christian world. 6. The impact on intellectual and philosophical movements. One of the most enduring legacies of the Crusades was their role in bringing Eastern knowledge into contact with the Western intellectual tradition. During the Crusades, many European scholars and clergy were exposed to a wealth of knowledge and philosophical ideas that had been preserved and developed by Islamic and Byzantine civilizations. This exposure had profound effects on medieval thought, paving the way for intellectual movements that would later come to fruition in the Renaissance. 6.1. The rediscovery of ancient Greek and Roman texts. The Crusaders' interactions with Muslim scholars often led to the exchange of intellectual resources. Many of the ancient Greek and Roman texts, which had been lost to the West during the Dark Ages, were preserved and studied by Islamic scholars in centers of learning like Baghdad and Córdoba. Through the Crusades, these texts, along with commentary from Islamic philosophers like Averroes and Avicenna, were translated into Latin and made available to European scholars. This rediscovery of classical knowledge played a crucial role in the revival of learning in Europe. 6.2. The birth of scholasticism. The influx of philosophical and scientific ideas from the East also contributed to the development of scholasticism, an intellectual movement that sought to reconcile faith and reason. The interaction with Arabic scholars who had preserved the works of Aristotle and other classical philosophers led European scholars to reconsider the relationship between faith and philosophy, thus shaping the future of medieval theology and Christian doctrine. As scholars in Christian Europe began to engage with these new ideas, universities in places like Paris, Oxford, and Bologna began to thrive. These centers of learning were heavily influenced by the Crusades' intellectual exchanges, fostering a culture of inquiry that would evolve into the Renaissance humanism that championed the ideals of individualism, secularism, and the study of the classics. 7. The impact on art and architecture. The Crusades also had a profound influence on the art and architecture of medieval Europe. As Crusaders traveled to the Holy Land, they encountered new architectural styles, artistic motifs, and cultural practices that would